Hello, everybody. Welcome to ELNET's International Briefing. I'm Mark Sachs, one of ELNET's regional directors. We've got a really interesting conversation lined up today. But before I introduce our speaker, Ahmed Quraishi, I want to identify three headlines from last week that I think everybody should be aware of. The first one, in a huge win for social media compliance in the war on misinformation, Elon Musk turned on location tracking for X, which identifies the location of the person who posts a comment. Not surprisingly, anecdotal evidence suggests that the majority of anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas, and quote, pro-Palestinian posts have been generated in countries like Turkey, Qatar, Pakistan, Yemen, and others, including North American and European countries. What this means is, what we all know, global opprobrium towards Israel was generated by a vast propaganda machine driven by bots and anonymity. Now, the jig may be up, finally. So let's hope other platforms figure out ways to increase transparency like Elon Musk and Twitter or X has. The second one, and I would say this leads me into the second headline. For close to 6 months, David and I have been saying from this perch that once Israel's war with Hamas quiets down, so will the influence of anti-Israel protests. Well, last week, 130 military officials from 19 countries traveled to Israel to learn warfare techniques from Israel's seven-front war. I can't help but point out that a few of these countries, the UK, Canada, and Slovenia, boycotted Israel, sanctioned Israel, and or gave credence to the egregious idea that Israel was committing genocide. Yet there they were, in Israel, learning from those they accused of being mass murderers. George Orwell would call this doublethink. I'll call it for what it is, hypocrisy. Importantly, 11 of the 19 countries were European, and all 11 have increased their diplomatic and defense cooperation with Israel. Notably, Germany's $2.3 billion deal through NATO, Romania's $2.5 billion deal just a couple of months ago, as well as Serbia's $1.5 billion deal. And just 2 weeks ago, Estonia welcomed Israel's embassy in Tallinn, Estonia. All of these reflect ELNET's mission and work, and all reflect the promising future of the Europe-Israel relationship. And the third headline was Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to the White House, where he secured major agreements with the United States, including a strategic defense agreement, the potential sale of F-35 jets, not to be equal to Israel's, a civilian nuclear cooperation agreement, and a designation as a major non-NATO ally. On his part, MBS announced that Saudi Arabia would increase U.S. investments up to $1 trillion and secure deals for AI, critical minerals, and other sectors. While the question on everybody's mind seems to be whether or not the Saudis will join the Abraham Accords, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's losing sight of the forest through the trees. Once you understand what's actually taking place within Saudi Arabia, I don't think you're going to care whether or not the Saudis join right now. I don't think they will, but I think you'll understand why it's better perhaps that they don't. And this will be something I explore with our guest, Ahmed Quraishi. But before I do, I want to acknowledge that this week in the U.S., we'll celebrate Thanksgiving. So in the spirit of Thanksgiving and on ELNET's behalf, I'd like to offer gratitude for each one of you, especially those of you who support ELNET at the Diplomacy Club level. Diplomacy Club members make this organization run, and we simply couldn't do what we do without your support. And on a personal note, the many of you whom I've gotten to know bring texture and added purpose to my work. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now, I want to also remind you, it's not too late to become a club member. Just go to elnetus.org, view our new, beautiful website, and join our efforts to broaden and deepen diplomatic, defense and security, and economic cooperation between Israel and Europe. Now to our guest, Ahmed Quraishi. And I will tell all of you, I met Ahmed through Twitter. His posts started showing up in my feed. I found it insightful, intriguing, and worth reaching out to. So I did. And an hour after our conversation began, I said to him, we need to have you on our briefing. Ahmed is a journalist, war correspondent, television personality, and international affairs expert with over 2 decades of experience in the Gulf, Pakistan, and MENA regions, working professionally in English, Arabic, and Urdu. He reported on U.S. military deployments in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, including during the 2003 invasion, and played a key role in launching Al Ray Media in the Gulf while modernizing Pakistan's state-run TV channel after 9/11. Ahmed, it is an absolute pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this introduction. And I'm really very happy to join the fine people in the ELNET circle here. And thank you to Randy also for making this happen. The technical side, obviously.
So my guess is, other than me, not many people on this call know who you are. So if you could take a few minutes to tell us your story, help us understand where you are right now, sort of where you've been and where you're going.
Exactly. Well, Mark, not really much to it, but there's never a dull moment, as they say in the Middle East. And if you're, about in this area, you're bound to be witnessing something or the other. So I was born in Kuwait, right? Around the time, very interesting times, the changes in Iran and Iraq, the first Gulf War, the Desert Storm. So I was born and raised in Kuwait. It used to be at that time a very interesting place where the PLO was born, where the Palestinian movement, first of all, took shape. Basically, the very first Fedayeen, the guerrilla training camps and whatnot, before they moved to Lebanon and Jordan and Tunisia, and of course the Iran-Iraq War. So very interesting time at that time. And my parents obviously are from Pakistan. And my father actually was in the British Army during World War II. So he was actually posted in Iraq and also in British Mandate Palestine. So he served in Jerusalem, he served in Iraq, and that's the connection with Kuwait. Kuwait is the entry point, to and from Iraq. And there's a lot of military cooperation between Pakistan and Kuwait. And to cut a long story short, I was born there and basically cut my teeth in the Arab media, the Arabic language media of the Middle East. It just so happened that Kuwait was one of two, maybe or three places in the Arab world that had a very robust, dynamic, I wouldn't say absolutely free media, but a lot of freedoms. Kuwait, Lebanon, and Egypt. And Kuwait, the media, so happened to sort of give space to the opposition from Iraq, from Syria, from Egypt, Lebanon, whatnot. So a very dynamic environment for me to grow up in, to see the 500,000, the second largest Palestinian diaspora in Kuwait, and just a stone throw away the Iran-Iraq war. And of course, Kuwait was impacted by that, a wave of bombings and rocket attacks from Iran. And of course, ended up with the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. And that's where I had the opportunity to work very, very closely with the US military as well. And then, of course, back to Pakistan, where I had a chance to work with President Musharraf's team when he took over in 1999, and he stayed in power up until throughout the war on terror after 9/11. So an interesting place and an interesting time. So basically, a war correspondent and a journalist.
You grew up in a milieu that is not known to be favorable towards Israel, and some would probably argue not entirely favorable to the West. Your parents obviously grew up in more worldly than the average Kuwaiti, perhaps, or average Pakistani. How did you manage to maneuver through that milieu, in that environment that tends to be anti-Israel, hostile to the West, and retain this worldly view, or develop this worldly view, I should say?
So yeah, I will say, Mark, it was, it was really, it's fascinating to experience rapid changes and be in a position where you're able to see new sources and new information and change your position accordingly. And it just so happens, now if, when I look back, I basically see this region and our people here in this region basically the victims of, I would say, one of the biggest hoaxes of history, one of the biggest deceptions or disinformation or whatever you want to call it, where I would say an entire region and culture was hijacked by a couple of narratives and was misled into wars and destruction when this region and its people and the very smart people in this region could have gone another way. So I would say, I having been, in Kuwait and I basically had teachers who came from different parts of Palestinian territories and places that are now part of Israel. And of course, having seen the Fedayeen, the guerrilla, the PLO, Arafat basically was an engineer, a road public works engineer in the Kuwaiti Ministry of Public Works, and he was funded obviously by the Kuwaiti government and started the very first Fedayeen training camps that went on later. I mean, these were the people that went on to hijack planes, to attack Israeli diplomats and even Arab diplomats who did not toe the line of that, Palestinianism or the Arab revolutionary thought. And so it was very interesting to see that perspective, and then to see the change that came with the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and Operation Desert Storm, and when we saw how an Arab country invaded another Arab country, claiming to want to liberate Jerusalem and to defeat Israel and to create a Palestinian state. So that was the moment where a lot of the Arabs, and I was one of the people there, obviously having been born in Kuwait, who asked ourselves, wait a second, you want to defeat Israel and you want to create Palestine by attacking another Arab country, taking over that country. And we know why you're doing it. You're doing it because of the oil wealth. Kuwait is an oil rich country. So there's something wrong here. Somebody, and it seems a lot of people, are using the Palestinian tag or the Palestinian, I would say the Palestinian card to do a lot of wrong things. And it's not just about Palestine. This is a hijacked issue that is being used for vested interests, and that's where I think I would dare say, I would leave that for the historians. Obviously, we're not, but I think 1990, a lot of people were became aware in the region to the fact that there's another narrative. This definitely cannot be true. You can't come and tell me because of the benefit of the Arabs and the Muslims, Iraq, for example, I'm going to attack and occupy another country, which is also an Arab, a Muslim country, and just simply say, well, you know what, I'm doing it, because I'm fighting Israel, and you need to stand with me because if whatever I do, it's because of Israel and it's because of Palestine. So there's something wrong here, and that's where the process, I think, of revision of this history that we've been taught for the better part, in fact, for almost all of the 20th century and the first quarter of the 21st century, where people actually began to change. And that's when I also noticed that the region's media and the first signs of what would come later, a revision of history. We've been misled. I think there's an issue, there's a conflict. Yes, there was something in Palestine. There are Jews, there are Arabs there. Both have lived there, both have a claim there. But it's a political issue that has been hijacked to do a lot of other wrong things, like 9/11, like the invasion of Kuwait, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, like Hamas, definitely, like Hezbollah. So, and of course, the Iranian Revolution and whatnot. So a lot of wrong has been done by a few, issues that have been hijacked, and we need to talk about that. And I think 1990 and the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait was the moment that really happened. And of course, then followed by 9/11.
And as you just noted, a lot has happened between 1990 and let's say 2025. So that seed of realization has taken a very, very long time to sprout. So we need more minds and more people like you who recognize what has taken place and perhaps will help change the future. So with that in mind, because you have a very worldly perspective. You've worked in Brussels, I believe, because I remember you mentioning Hillel Neuer, having worked with him. You've worked with the American Jewish Congress. Um, you've lived in Pakistan, Dubai, Kuwait, Brussels. It's pretty remarkable how broad your vision is at this point. So we all know where we've been over the last 25 years. You mentioned Iraq, Afghanistan. We still have a war between Russia and Ukraine. We saw the war between Israel and, or its seven front war. A lot has taken place and a lot has changed. You've seen cultural divisions expand and narrow, and you're seeing a vastly different Middle East. So where you stand right now, what do you see as the most important trends over the next 5 to 10 years? I can't go out farther than that, but let's look at 5 to 10 years. Where do you think these trends are going? What are you watching?
I don't think I can find the words, Mark, just to tell you, to convey to you how I would say, excited may not be the right word, considering wars and tragedies and transformations, and they're not good for everyone. They're painful. But the fact is, I never thought that I would see in my lifetime the kind of changes this region is undergoing. I mean, just imagine this region going from a moment where, or a time when everybody agreed that we need to exclude certain minorities from our region. For example, Jews have no place in this region, to go from that position to a position now where I see people in government, I see people in the media in this region, and ordinary people who say, you know what, the story of this region is bigger than the one that we've been taught over the past century, and we need to be more inclusive of other peoples and people. In addition to many other minorities in this region, the Jews are also part of this region's story, and we have so much in common. We need to revive all of that. We need to coexist. So to move from that position of exclusion, of denialism, to now acceptance and then inclusiveness, it's really truly amazing. And I grew up, for example, Mark, having never met a Palestinian, for example, and I had teachers with Palestinians. Almost all of my childhood friends were Palestinians and other nationalities from this region, but a lot of them Palestinians. I never met a Palestinian who said, you know what, Ahmed, I think we Palestinians probably made a mistake. Maybe we should have accepted the 1948 UN partition plan, when the Jews of Palestine, and the Israelis, accepted their state given to them by the United Nations, and we should have accepted the Arab state in Palestine given to us by the United Nations, and not have listened to the Arab revolutionary populists and the Arab revolutionary Islamists at that time, and declared a civil war that did not go well for us. And that mindset basically spawned an ideology, a radical ideology that led all the way to several disasters, ending up with what we see happening today in Gaza. Because you cannot disconnect Gaza from the mindset that compelled the Arabs and the Palestinians to reject the peaceful creation of two states in British Mandate Palestine that could have lived peacefully. And if I'm correct, historically, the Jews of Palestine accepted that peaceful partition. The Arabs of Palestine did not, and we ended up with this conflict, which was exploited by many other people later on. So we have this transformation, and this debate going on right now, and it's happening everywhere. Mark, I mean, I'm sitting right now in Islamabad, in Pakistan, and we have Afghanistan, we have India, we have Iran. Not the best neighborhood to be in. Lots of issues, but we also have right now a debate going on in Pakistan. Very fascinating. If you have the time, for example, I'm not going to repeat all of that. Obviously, I'll be very quick. But if you were here, you'd be fascinated. There are debates everywhere on TV, on YouTube channels, on social media about the fact that Pakistan might be sending troops to, for example, Gaza. And that would entail dealing with both Hamas, with Palestinians, and with Israel, and with the US military, obviously, with the CENTCOM. And Pakistan does not have diplomatic ties with Israel, although both countries have had, occasionally some sort of communication. Now, without diplomatic ties, you'll have diplomats possibly and military people from both countries coordinating. You can't do that, of course, obviously, once you're deployed in Gaza. So that means, meeting each other, getting to know each other. How is it going to happen? I think a lot of Pakistanis will be surprised to discover, for example, there are a lot of Israelis who are Israeli Muslims. They're not just Israeli Jews. They're Israeli Christians. They're Israeli Druze. They're Bedouin Israelis, and they're Israeli Muslims. A lot of Pakistanis will be surprised. A lot of Pakistanis, believe it or not, 250 million people, one of the largest Muslim nations. A lot of people here, if you walk around the street here and ask people, will say, I don't know. I have never seen on, despite YouTube and social media, I have never seen, have never met an Israeli Muslim. So a lot of changes are happening. How is it going to be like? Do the Jews really like us? A lot of the Israelis would be surprised to meet a lot of Pakistanis, if that were to happen. So the point is, there are a lot of changes are happening. But of course, you still have the old hatreds. I don't want to get ahead of myself. There are a lot of hatreds. It's difficult. It's very divisive. Religion and radicalism and revolutionary thought, all of that, and anti-Semitism, which is historic, all of these things actually have come together to create this combustible mix, which is what Middle East is really all about. But this is a region right now in transformation. Where it's gonna get to, I'm on the optimistic side, and I'll basically just conclude with this sentence that I see a lot of good, happening. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. We will see some setbacks. We are actually seeing some setbacks as we speak. I can list a number of things, and you can, Mark, which are negative trends, but we can also list a number of trends which are positive. And I think, we need to be cautiously optimistic.
Well, I thought one indicator was the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif speaking at the Sharm el Sheikh confab. I was very surprised that he was there and actually was asked to speak. So I think that goes to one of the indications that you're alluding to, and one of the positive trends, perhaps, that Pakistan is looking to play some role. Now, I know in the past there's been some duplicity between Pakistan and the U.S. in the way the military and the cooperation worked in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. But hopefully this indicates that Pakistan is looking at a very different future as the Middle East starts to change.
Exactly. Well, I'll say two things here, Mark. Whenever Pakistan and the United States work together, good things actually happen when they actually work together and not really fought each other like they did over the past 15, or 20 years after 9/11. A lot of misunderstandings. And I was one of the people among a number of Pakistanis who said, we're doing it wrong in both capitals, in Islamabad and Washington. We need to work together. We have the same enemies here across the region, and we have some overlapping interests, and we need to work together because a lot of things are similar in terms of what we want to see happen in this region. I'm glad that, we are on track right now. We have similar interests in Afghanistan. We have similar interests in the Gulf, and we have similar interests also when it comes to peace between, or at least stability between Palestinians and Israel and the situation in Gaza. So coming to Gaza and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Pakistan does have a very strong commitment to the Palestinian aspirations, and Pakistan would like to see Palestinians, get what they want. But there are also a lot of voices in Pakistan that say, what, our role should be to help Palestinians and Israel make peace, whatever way we can, and we need to have very, very good, robust relations with both Palestinians and with Israel. And we need to do this, and that's the only way to really make peace. You need to talk to the people who are involved, and you cannot be detached. So when you talk about Pakistan and Israel, Mark, you have to remember one thing. There are only two nuclear armed countries in the wider Middle East region. They're Israel and Pakistan. Of course, maybe there are one or two other countries who are trying to, become nuclear. Iran foremost, and maybe one or two others who are pursuing civil nuclear programs. But Pakistan and Israel both are known to have nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. And it only makes sense with these two countries, even if they were not to like each other. It only makes sense that they talk to each other in order to avoid any misunderstandings and understand. And frankly, I belong to the school of thought that sees both Israel and Pakistan among a wider number of other countries in the region as part of an emerging coalition of moderate states that are focused on economic integration and on peace and on shared security and shared prosperity. So there are a lot of opportunities really to work together. But we need to get over this difficult moment right now that we have in Gaza. And so there are a lot of reasons for Pakistan to be involved. Let's not forget that we in Pakistan fought Al-Qaeda alongside the United States and other allies. And we fought one of the bloodiest guerrilla wars in modern history. And I think there's a lot to be learned, as you said in your introduction, there's a lot to be learned from Israel's experience in guerrilla warfare and in fighting terror groups and militant organizations. And frankly, Israel has set a record in fighting a multi-front war and multi-theater war, really, with a number of proxy terror militant organizations. And Pakistan has an experience sort of similar, multi-front, multi-organizational, many groups that were involved, the Pakistani Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, Al-Qaeda, some cells or elements of Daesh or the ISIS. So Pakistan did that as well. And that's why a lot of the counterterrorism experts in Pakistan are watching very closely how Israel is dealing with Gaza, a city where 2 million people were taken hostage. And I'm surprised that the world has not awoken to the fact that we've just seen over the last 2 years, I think probably the biggest example in history, in military history, of 2 million people taken hostage by a terror organization working for or serving the interests of another country sitting hundreds of miles away, and I'm referring to Iran, obviously. Mm-hmm. A militant organization, Hamas, serving Iranian interests and taking hostage 2 million Palestinians, hijacking their story, whatever story that is, and creating havoc all across the region, and succeeding, by the way, in scuttling the vision for peace that the Saudis, the Israelis, I dare say even at least some of the Palestinians, and obviously the United States and others were trying to craft in the region just before October 7. So there's a lot going, actually, and it only makes sense for a country like Pakistan, and also the largest Muslim country by population, Indonesia, to be involved as well. And I think these countries have something to contribute. And I'll just conclude, I must say this, what the Indonesian president actually said in September at the United Nations in New York, when he actually said, if you really want to have peace in this region, yes, we need to listen to all of you, all of our concerns. We need to listen to the Palestinians, but we also need to listen to Israel and to the Israelis and to the Jewish people, and take into account their security concerns as well. So you cannot just dictate a solution or talk about a solution that is devoid, is detached from reality, is idealistic, and does not take into account the interests, yes, of Palestinians, yes, of the people of Gaza, but also of the people of Israel. Everybody deserves to have security, and it only makes sense for all of these countries to be involved.
The word that comes to mind, or the phrase that comes to mind for Pakistan, is an aspiring player. I think there's an element of FOMO here, fear of missing out. India just signed a huge MOU with Israel. You're seeing the Saudis, Bahrainis, Emiratis, Moroccans, and other countries, really Indonesia, as you just mentioned, starting to cultivate really robust conversations with Israel along the lines of economic opportunity and stability. And if you are sitting at the seat of radicalism, like Pakistan is, right in the middle of it and dealing with it, as you just noted, you want strong allies. You want economic stability. You want intelligence sharing. You want other opportunities that are going to bring Pakistan into the 21st century. And I think there's a real opportunity, as you just described, for pragmatism to win out. And that leads me to my next question about Saudi Arabia. And as I mentioned in my introduction, the Abraham Accords as a goal. There's a new, I will call her young because I think she's a relatively young analyst, Zineb Rabua, that I've been following over the last several weeks, and she puts out incredible analysis and thoughtful ideas on what's taking place in the region. And she brought up something that has been weighing on me for a while, and she put great words to it, and that is, we in the West look at a particular goal or project onto something that we think should be done in order for peace to ensue. And in that case, it's the Abraham Accords. If we could just get the Saudis to join the Abraham Accords, everything will be great. But what MBS once said is, I don't want to be Sadat. He can't move his people faster than what they're ready to do. And what the case she makes, and I'm going to read it because I think it's important, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this as you weigh in on the Saudis, but also the bigger picture. She says, MBS seems to be betting on a specific direction. The course he sets on technology, investment, and cooperation with Western partners, combined with the kingdom's position as guardian of Islam's holiest sites, is meant to redefine the region's political and religious landscape. MBS's futurism, therefore, serves a real and significantly underestimated political function. The country's wealth gives the state room to pursue large-scale transformation. The monarchical structure allows decisions to be imposed without paralysis of coalition, of politics, and the very combination enables futurism to operate as a genuine strategy for reshaping institutions and national identity. At the same time, the futurist projects create a momentum that leaves little room for clerical resistance. The pressure is not ideological. It comes from jobs, salaries, contracts, and institutional incentives. This helps explain why the transformation of Saudi Arabia proceeds without large public religious confrontation. So what she's suggesting is all of what's taking place within Saudi is a precondition for Abraham Accords, more than the typical line of we want a path for Palestinian statehood, which may be relevant. But over time, joining the Abraham Accords will be a fait accompli rather than something that will actually have to be formalized. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the Saudi Crown Prince Mark was, I think he was very emphatic, very clear when he said, and sitting in the White House with President Trump, he said very clearly, we want to join Abraham Accords, which is euphemism for saying we want relations with Israel. So he said it very emphatically, and that shuts the door on any sort of conjecture on what the Saudis really want. They want to have a relationship with Israel. The night of October 7, 2023, there were Israeli officials in the capital, Riyadh, on an informal visit. But that was October 7, or the night of October 7. I'll take you just a few weeks back. When I say a few weeks, I mean 2 to 3 weeks back. I think there was an Arab-Israeli social media influencer that was invited by the Saudi media and interviewed and was platformed. I don't know if he traveled on an Israeli passport or he carries another passport, but he was, and he put out a video from Riyadh. So what I'm just saying is that the Saudis did actually change, or in fact, the Saudi media, by the way, Mark, you have to understand this. Saudi media played a key role in changing attitudes in the region toward Israel. By the way, so did the Qatari media, and specifically Al Jazeera. I know a lot of people
Hmm.
don't like Al Jazeera. I personally have my own long list of grievances, but the fact is, Al Jazeera is the Arab media outlet that brought Arab Israelis and Arabic language spokespersons of the Israeli government and military into every Arab household through Al Jazeera, obviously. And that was the first time when 99.9% of the Arabs saw Israelis talking to them inside their homes on their TV screens for the first time and got to see and understand the Israeli perspective in Arabic language. And they were surprised to know, of course, that they're Arab Israelis and they can be military officers and spokespeople and people in government and ambassadors. So Al Jazeera but that was Al Jazeera. Saudi media is far bigger in size across the footprint of the Saudi media is huge. So it used to be there was a time when the Lebanese and the Egyptian media were and the Syrian media and the Iraqi media used to dominate the Arab world. But right now it's the Gulf media that dominates, thankfully, because the Gulf Arab media is moderate. And the Saudi media played a key role in that through TV outlets, through newspapers, and online internet outlets. And basically, the Saudi media sort of, I would say, moderated or tempered, some of the extreme impulses in the Arab thinking and thought and I would say this happened immediately after the Cold War, so almost the past 3 decades. So a lot of credit really to the Saudi media, even before Saudi Crown Prince MBS came to the position where he is now. So a lot of credit to the Saudis even before MBS. Now the MBS is an amazing personality here in this region. If you're in this region, Mark, I can tell you from Pakistan all the way to Morocco and everywhere in between, young people in this region look up to MBS and MBZ and a number of other young
Hmm.
and emerging leaders and princes and sheikhs here across the region who have new ideas. Let's not forget the ruler of the Emirate of Dubai, of the United Arab Emirates. He's been Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid. Has been an inspiration for people across the region. So MBS is an inspiration also, and people look up to him, and people say, you know what, this is the kind of leadership we need across this region. So I'm very optimistic, about seeing the way the Saudis are moving forward, and specifically, despite the setbacks. By the way, I acknowledge these setbacks. This is a huge setback, unfortunately, and a huge success for both Hamas and for Iran, the fact that they were able to delay the Saudi Israeli normalization. I mean, let's accept it. That's the only thing, that they really succeeded at. They created a new set of problems, embroiled the whole region into that, and delayed, but they did not end. They certainly delayed the Saudi Israeli normalization, which is very important for our region, by the way. And even if I were to hate Israel and not like Israel, I will say we must have normalization with Israel. I will always say that because that's the only way, the only path for our region to grow is by inclusion, by accepting Israel's place in this region. Frankly, most of the countries in this region have no conflict of interest with Israel or the Jewish people. In fact, we are now recovering and rediscovering our own Islamic history, and we're discovering that the Jewish people and the Jewish culture has always been an intrinsic component of the Arab Islamic civilization across this region. So going through the Arab Muslim history, of course, I'm not going to do that, of course, but just very quickly, we know that we've had ministers and prime ministers in various Arab and Muslim states over the past 15 centuries, So Jews have always been part of our story in this region, and they need to rejoin that story. And the aberration that we've seen over the past, I don't know, 70 or 80 years is just that. Is an aberration. It needs to end. It needs to be ended, and everything needs to be. History needs to resume from where it stopped, and that will only happen when we have full normalization between Arabs, Muslims, and Jews, and between the countries of this region and Israel. And I think that realization exists across the region, and especially among the young the crop of young leadership in the Gulf and the Arab region, especially in Saudi Arabia, obviously, a country that completely, I mean, every Saudi I speak to, I come back, with the same message. We need to make peace in this region. We need to be inclusive. We need to have economic integration.
On that note, yes, couldn't agree more, and thank you. I was beautifully and emphatically said. I want to remind everybody to submit some questions. There is a question here that takes us in a direction I'd like us to go. It's an interesting question. So the subject is where I want to go, but the player here is what I find interesting. So the question is, what role has North Korea played in supporting radical Islam, and especially in terms of nuclear development? Well, I think there's two different parts to that. So let's just go with, does North Korea play any role in supporting radical Islam throughout the Middle East or the broader, the Middle East? Do you know?
None that I heard of, really.
Okay.
None that I heard of. There was a time when there used to be some talk about North Korea, probably working with Iran, with Iraq.
Yeah.
There used to be a time back, I don't know, early 1990s when I heard and I read some stuff about communication between Pakistan, where I'm sitting right now, and North Korea. But those things never went far much. And I don't think North Korea really has any role to play in the Middle East.
Okay. But let's stick with Islam, because I find right now I'd love to get your perspective on the growing divide between Western European countries and their relationship with Israel, and the Muslim countries and their relationships with Israel. Those in the East, as you named all the countries that are aligning with a sort of a pro-Israel or pro-broader Middle East perspective. Help us understand where this divide is and what we should do about it. Obviously, it comes, the alignment of the left and Islamists, the Red-Green Alliance, is playing a large role in Western Europe, whereas the Muslim Brotherhood has been outlawed by the Saudis, Emiratis, Bahrainis, I think Morocco, and another number of other countries. So what's going on here, and what do you think the West needs to do, particularly in Western Europe?
Yeah, well, it just seems, Mark, that the West is too busy and too embroiled and taken hostage by ideological culture wars, whereas the Middle East and the Arab Muslim moderate states, at least, are trying to get out of that. So whereas many moderate Arab and Muslim states refused to allow after October 7 to allow the flags of Hezbollah and Hamas to be waved in our cities across the Middle East. They were platformed, unfortunately, in many Western cities. So Muslim Brotherhood, for example, is proscribed and banned in many moderate Arab and Muslim states, and Muslim Brotherhood, unfortunately, is platformed in the West with no questions asked. And let's take the example of what happened in Chicago just a couple of days ago. I would say you have Muslim cities like Dubai, like Amman in Jordan, like even Doha in Qatar, where you can light up a Christmas tree with no problems. And then you have a city in Germany, or you have Chicago, where lighting up a Christmas tree leads to riots. So something is wrong. There's something wrong, and I think there's a sort of a misunderstanding in the West that somehow appeasing Islamist extremism, or what we call now Islamism, to differentiate it from Muslims. Islamism, of course, the political Islam, or political or extremist groups using Islam, as a front for their politics and agendas. Um, I think there's the misunderstanding in the West is they need to in the West you need to differentiate between platforming Islamists and sympathizing with Muslims, if that's what you want to do. And I find it really, really strange to see so much debate about Islamophobia in the West, whereas, frankly speaking, I don't see, yes, you can find some pockets in the West of far right extremists who may be anti-Muslim or have anti-Muslim hatred, but by and large, give me an example, Mark, of anywhere else in history where the capitals, the two largest capitals of an ideology, and I'm talking here about the Western civilization, the Western culture, capitalism, the free world, call it whatever you want. The two biggest cities of that culture, of that civilization, London and New York, being led by mayors who are Muslims. It never happened. Give me
So,
any two, give me any.
so Ahmed, I
Yeah,
want to
sorry,
pause
Mark, go
there
ahead.
because I find something interesting. And I want to make sure we get to it because part of, I think, some of the questions we're getting here, you'll answer in this case. You quickly switched from Islamophobia to anti-Muslim hate. Very, very different concepts. And so I want to get your thoughts on the term Islamophobia, which to me, not to me, factually, it's used in a weaponized fashion to silence debate of the ideology, of the religion, or of Islam. So as a result, we get blasphemy laws that only apply to ideologies. We get hate speech laws that only apply to one, whereas anti-Muslim defines actual actions. One of our questions has to go to, how do you change, or I think where you're going is, how do you change the dynamic of the relationship? How do we address the word
Exactly.
Islamophobia versus anti-Muslim hate?
So, like you, I have probably you as well. I have lots of Islamist friends. I have lots of leftist friends, all good people, as long as they're peaceful and debate you peacefully and not impose their views. But we have to acknowledge one thing. Some of our Islamist friends and some of our leftist friends actually came up with this very snazzy, really, word, Islamophobia, not to solve the problem of anti-Muslim hate, if there is that problem, and it exists. You have hatreds of all kinds,
Sure.
but not to solve that problem. The Islamophobia is really used, as you said, to silence any talk, any discussion, any debate, any criticism or critique of Islamist groups. So what I see happening in the West is, under the guise of fighting Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hate, what is happening is we're being silenced from talking about the violent ideologies that hide behind the Islamic label and basically sort of poison Western societies and produce, poisonous forms of Islamist extremism and re-export it back to the Middle East as well. So we are suffering because of that here, because extremists or Muslim Brotherhood outposts or whatever you want to call them, sitting in the West, working with some of our friends on the left, use the label Islamophobia to silence any criticism of what they're doing. And what they're doing is to abuse Western freedoms, use the freedoms and the economic empowerment that comes from operating from the West. And these extremists basically use these platforms, Western passports, the economic empowerment that they get from living in the West and working in the West and fundraising in the West, and they re-export back to us in the Middle East some of the worst forms of Islamism, So we sit here in the Middle East debating and discussing the need to outlaw and ban these organizations, to ban Hezbollah and Hamas from ever operating at any campus anywhere across the Middle East. And then we end up, and then we have young people coming to us and coming to me saying, "Well, Ahmed, you want to ban these people here, but look at Colombia. You just see the protest or the encampment at Colombia, and there are many young people who are waving Hamas or Hezbollah flags. So that's freedom. You should allow that here as well." Problem is, we've been through hell over the past 7 decades in the Middle East because we allowed these ideologies here. So we can't look at you in the West allowing these groups to operate and become empowered thanks to Western freedoms, Western democracy, which are all good things. Western freedoms, Western democracy, Western economic empowerment, all good things. But because you don't allow them to integrate, to assimilate into your societies, these people who run away, who escape from the countries here, possibly because of political suppression, maybe legitimate reasons, but also because they want to spread a kind of extremism that is outlawed in our regions because we have experienced the result of allowing these ideologies to operate freely, without some form of check on them. And they go to the West, and some people in the West misunderstand or misunderstand or fail to differentiate, so to speak, between these ideologies that operate in the name of Islam and the Muslims themselves. So it's very nice of the West to elect two Muslim mayors of London and New York, the two largest, biggest cities of the Western civilization, if I were to put it that way and frame it in that way. It's very nice. It's very good. It shows sensitivity on the part of the West and inclusivity. But at the same time, I think the Islamophobia label is being abused and misused to allow Islamist groups to operate. And we've seen many cities in Europe that even now continue to be hotbeds for some of the worst offenders, violent Islamist groups that operate in our region. And I'm talking about networks that operate under the banner or somehow are linked to Hezbollah, Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, and other violent groups across the region. So I think this discussion, this debate needs to be had in the West. I'm very glad, I'm very happy to see over the past 2 or 3 years, this is really happening. We have a moment right now because I think in the United States, the government, Washington is debating now to outlaw or ban the Muslim Brotherhood, which is, a lot of people don't know this. This is, the name sounds really, very nice, probably. The Muslim Brotherhood, it's a brotherhood of people, working together, nice people, good people. But actually, this is the umbrella organization, the ideology that spawned almost all of the worst offenders, violent Islamist groups, both Sunni and Shia, by the way, because Khomeiniism, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al Qaeda, Al Shabaab, ISIS, all of these really trace their origins one way or the other back to the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, which began in 1928, almost a century ago. So a defining moment right now for the West to decide, because at least you have this debate in the United States and in Washington, D.C. about the Muslim Brotherhood. Unfortunately, I'm yet to see that kind of debate really happening in Europe. It's not happening in Europe at all. So, and I'm really so sorry to see an amazing city like London, for example, becoming a sort of a refuge for activists who are openly working with some of the worst offenders in the Middle East, who are one way or the other tied up with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with the ideology and the mindset behind October 7, that is an enemy not just of the West and of Israel, it's an enemy of Muslims as well. So this is really, and I'm a huge proponent and one of the weaker voices really in this school of thought that says we as Muslims need to work closely with the Christians, with the Jews, and I don't want to make it, sound as if it's about religion. As modern people, Arabs, Muslims, Israelis, Americans, the West, and others all over the world, we need to work together to defeat this mindset of hatred. And that's where I will conclude also by addressing the question of where the West stands really on Israel. Whereas I understand that the West is embroiled in these culture wars when it comes to Israel, a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of baggage, from the days of fascism and Nazism and whatnot, But we in our region, frankly, are fed up with that. We want none of that. We want inclusivity. We want economic integration. We want to understand each other. We don't want to demonize Israelis for being Jews or for being Israelis. We want to understand where they come from. We want to understand their security concern. We want to help them and the Palestinians live peacefully. We want to address the aspirations of both Palestinians and the Israelis because we want to live in peace. We don't want culture wars. We don't want, we're fed up with that. So if there are leftist radicals, leftist or radical Islamists in the West, I'm frankly now inclined to, even when I mention Islamist, honestly speaking, I'm not talking about Islamists in the Middle East. I'm talking about Western Islamists, because the Islamism that is feeding Hamas right now is more Western Islamism. It's not from my country. I have not seen over the past 2 years in Pakistan or in Islamabad, Mark, I have not seen a lot of people here on the streets waving Hamas flags or chanting slogans that are pro-Hamas and Hezbollah. But I've seen hundreds of videos of those chants in Western cities. So I think a lot of young people in my country are getting the wrong message. We are getting the wrong message. We're telling our people MBS, the young leadership in the Gulf, in the Arab world, is telling our young people here to change, whereas it just seems the West now seems to be stuck with the ailments that we have gone through over the past 7, 8 decades. Why do you think, Mark, the Syrians were so happy to get rid of Assad and of the Iranian militias and of Hezbollah, and even when they took back their country, they refused to really come out in even or organize even a single rally in support of Hamas? Why? Because, and that's Syria, by the way, for those who are listening to us and who don't know, Syria is the birthplace of Arab rejectionism, of hatred, of Arab nationalism, of the idea that we will push all Jews into the sea, and so we don't need to accept the 1948 UN peaceful partition of British Mandate Palestine between Arabs and Jews. The hotbed, Syria, where I don't know the current population of Syria right now, but whatever it is, 25 million, all of them were indoctrinated in this ideology. And after being liberated from the Assad regime, they did not come out in even a single rally supporting Hamas or Hezbollah or, we'll push Jews into the sea. Why? Because we are sick and tired in this region of these culture wars. We don't want none of that. We want economic integration. Unfortunately, the West, and I'm sure you've seen that clip from 2017 of the current information minister, the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed. He's one of the young foreign ministers that we have in this region, and he says something very interesting in 2017. He said, I'm afraid a day will come when some of the most virulent extremists would probably not come from the Middle East, will emerge from Western cities. And I hope we're not there. I hope we're not there. But I think we need to have this discussion. It's about time.
Wow, that was quite a tour de force. Thank you, Ahmed. We have a number of questions that we're not going to be able to get to. I typically like to end by asking somebody what they're optimistic about, but you've been so optimistic most of this call that I'm not sure our participants could handle more optimism. They just wouldn't know what to do with it. So on that note, I really want to say thank you for all your insights and what you've provided. I want to let everybody know that next Monday, we're going to have Remy Danielle from INSS. And for Diplomacy Club members only on December 4th, we're going to have Amit Segal talk about Israel's political system and what's going on. I know, Larry, you would like to say a few closing words. But again, I want to thank you, Ahmed. This is great seeing you in person and having this dialogue with you. I'd love to have you back and continue.
What a wonderful
Larry,
presentation. I mean, positive. We haven't heard like this at all before. And your take on the Western radicalism is also fascinating and gives us a lot of energy. As you say, Western Europe might be the worst place, but U.S. isn't much behind. So therefore, it was really, who else is doing this kind of work besides ELNET? I mean, it's extraordinary. And most of the people on today are contributors. And Mark is right that we get by the help of our friends. I think $2,500 of Diplomacy Club level contribution. But beyond that, this is such an excellent presentation that I'm not flabbergasted. I feel good. And that's a very, very big deal. We need support from our donors, and people on this particular Zoom are pretty good. A lot of them are good supporters. But you, sir, are unbelievable. And I don't know how we can clone you to bring you to London, Paris, and everywhere else where the issue is exactly the way you say it is, worse than it is in the Arab countries. So thank you.
I can't do better than that. Everybody, thank you, Larry, for those words. Thank you, Ahmed. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. For those of you in the United States celebrating Thanksgiving, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be thankful for all we have and be thankful for what more we will continue to do. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mark.